Hey guys, this is Daniel Sharon with the Module 10 discussion. So I'll be doing, so for the first question, what organizational knowledge is needed to best understand and communicate with the various publics? So first, I feel like you kind of have to understand your public and have a feel for who you're talking to in an audience. You have to recognize the book states, like in section 14.1, it states that there are things like um, dependence on a given public. What are the demographics, psychographics? What's the public's opinion on the organization? What's the public's opinion on the issue that the organization is addressing? So I feel like all those things have a correlation to what the question is being asked. And in section 14.1, it just has a list here that the publics of an organization. And so it kind of lists some things here. And stuff that we already are doing is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our public. So some strengths that we have is we might relate to them, or some weaknesses is that we might not relate to them, or some opportunities is you might want to mention something that they can relate to, or a threat is that, maybe you say something that you don't necessarily need to say or want to say because it might hurt you because they might not agree with it. So I think that section 14.1 definitely kind of helps with that. What are the key similarities between public relations and advertising and marketing? I feel like a key similarity is, like, for one, they're both trying to relate to the public. They're both trying to almost they are trying to persuade their public. I know in section 14.1 later down in the article or the book, section 14.1 talks about communication and theories of mass communication, and talks about how in the World War they used things like the television started to come out in the 1950s and 60s. They used posters, and they used the hypodermic needle theory, or what they call as the magic bullet theory. And so things like that can kind of help persuade a public. In the advertising and marketing, they use things like propaganda and things like that to help persuade an audience to a certain point of view. Like, for example, again, the World War. The World War is a great, the World War era in general is a great area to talk about when you're talking about a mass communication and mass persuasion, because it's a whole country, and it's a very more common thing to know. Some differences is that a public is like you're trying to relate to them, and you're trying to kind of persuade them in a certain point of view. You need things like belief, attitude, value, and opinion for a public to kind of buy into what you're saying. The advertising and marketing, you're just trying to sell them. You're just giving them a pitch. You're kind of just you're definitely trying to persuade them, but at the same time, you're trying to market and advertise that your way is a good way and the best way for them. And like I said, that goes back to the propaganda in section 14.2. It talks about using propaganda and in the world wars and stuff like that. So I think communicating in that type of way is definitely, for sure, a difference and a similarity. So question 3, we live in an age where it's becoming increasingly difficult to differentiate between legitimate information and propaganda, wherein inconvenient truths are labeled fake news by anyone who doesn't want to believe them. Discuss the difference between the two. So legitimate information is kind of like things like they're facts, and propaganda is just like an opinion that is just trying to be stated onto you to where they're trying to make you believe something. So it's like pretty much, without using the word propaganda, it's either legitimate information or persuasion. So it's kind of it's kind of different in the name already. And a couple of things is like propaganda tries to convince people to join the war and do this and do that. But if it was legitimate information, it would say like this many Americans are dying and we need this many people to sign up, because so it's kind of like pretty much putting it cut and dry, and propagandist kind of beating around the bush, so to say. Uh, so I think those two things are different in those ways, and I think that like the news and stuff, for example, it talks about that in section 14.1, and how in the 50s and 60s the World War countries used like television and newspapers, and how we as Americans actually today in today's age actually are exposed to millions of ads. It says that in section 14.1 somewhere, uh, that we see millions of ads on billboards and newspapers and television, and there's propaganda going on every day in the U.S. Almost every day, especially in election season. Um, like the election is a huge propaganda thing, as a huge propaganda example, because it's persuading people, a mass amount of people, trying to persuade them to a certain point. So like things like Trump flags and Bernie flags and Biden flags and posters and this and that are all things of propaganda. So um, I think things, and then things like comparing it to legitimate information like the coronavirus. It's legitimate information. Yeah, that's all I got for you guys, and thank you, and leave some comments down below. Thanks.